This is the Barry Richards Show. WBSM On Demand.
Without further ado,
WBSM presents The Barry Richards Show. Streaming live on WBSM.com and the WBSM app. Call 508-996-0500. Text us using App Chat on the WBSM app. Now, The Barry Richards Show.
Ever forget that Joe Rogan was on News Radio. Hour 2 of the Barry Richards Show. Barry is off today. He will be back in the driver's seat tomorrow. And speaking of the driver's seat, I'm making my way into the radio station, and I'm taking the slow road to China, basically Route 6 in. I turned right onto Rockdale Avenue, figure, well, I'll take Union Street off of Rockdale. And as I passed Court Street, I'm looking ahead to see if I have a clear way to turn left onto Union. And I see this little baby, a baby that can walk. You call that an infant toddler? I don't know. But someone I'm guessing is younger than the age of 2. Just kind of goes at as fast a pace as a kid like that can go, right into the street. And so my eyes go from looking at that kid to look up to see if there's another car coming from the other direction. And wouldn't you know it, here it comes at a regular pace. Now, that driver saw the kid out in the street. You've got to picture this, though. The kid is running into the street like he's running away from mommy. Mommy's trying to run after the kid. Mommy's, heavy set, doing her best to get out into the street, and she finally grabs him, but the other car had stopped before. The reason why I'm bringing this up, as parents, we know that it is a difficult task to have our eyes on our kids 24/7. You know it, I know it. But it's just another reason. If you're out there, out in the street, I hate to say tether your kid, but when you're out there talking to somebody else, you can't be 100% sure what the other kid is out there doing, the other kid being your son or your daughter. Thankfully, the other motorist saw what was going on and was able to basically apply the brakes, and they weren't going that fast that they needed to jam on the brakes. But the kid was out. I'm telling you, this little kid had no clue. And I guess we shouldn't expect. And mom is trying to scold the kid while she's holding him afterward. They don't understand that. They don't understand that. So it's just one of those things. I'm glad a tragedy was avoided, but man, oh man, Shevitz. It can be difficult. If you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The quote of the day from Tony Romo. How appropriate. It's easy to say you're more mature because all of a sudden you have a child, but it's a process. I really did not time these two to be the way that they were. It's easy to say you're more mature because all of a sudden you have a child, but it's a process. That is from Tony. There has been a lot of conversation over the past several months, but in particular, it's picked up here on the radio station, on my shows, on other programs dealing with what's going on in the Middle East, the college protests that are going on. If you didn't hear ABC at the top of the hour, they pointed out that Columbia University has given their students, the students that are holding protests, until 2 o'clock, basically to break things up and to sign a piece of paper saying that they're going to quit it. And if they do, then they can finish school for the rest of the year. At the same time, the university is facing a class action lawsuit for violating the safety protocols for the students. Now, I don't know back in the 60s if things broke down quite that way, but that's interesting. I did place a call over to Emerson College, tried to get their editor-in-chief to come on to the program today. She has a great op-ed in the, I guess we wouldn't call it an op-ed. She has a great editorial because she's the managing editor of the Berkeley Beacon, which is the Emerson College newspaper. And she points out quite a few things that you don't see in the Boston Herald or read in the Boston Globe or maybe saw on the television news if you watch 457 New England Cable News. But as we saw over the weekend, these protests aren't stopping anytime soon. They seem to be escalating. And so I've had conversations with folks, certainly here on this station. I've been called all kinds of names. Thank you. But I can take that. What I want to do at this particular time, with your indulgence, is to play a couple of excerpts from different news outlets, some independent, but they also reference major outlets that you would be familiar with about some of the accusations that have come out. I was having a discussion the other day with someone in regards to babies being beheaded. And my response has been, I'm not quite sure that's really happened. To which you go, you got to be kidding me. Everybody's seen it. Okay, and I said, well, I haven't seen it. And I'm told I haven't been looking in the right way. Everybody else is wrong. So here is one cut. You can find this on YouTube. Think whatever you want about social media. But if you listen to the reporter, she cites numerous sources. Again, sources that you can do like I did and do a follow-up check to, is she right? Anyway, this is called Fact Check. Did Hamas, great title, did Hamas behead babies?
Fact check. Did Hamas behead babies? Let's look at what we know so far about where this claim came from and why some media outlets and the White House have retracted the claim. On Saturday, October 7th, Hamas attacked the kibbutz of Kfar Aza. Members of the media were granted permission on October 10th, 3 days later, by the Israeli army to visit Kfar Aza and witness the aftermath of the Hamas attack. During the visit, a reporter from Israeli news outlet I-24 tweeted saying, "Soldiers told me they believe 40 babies, children, were killed." As the day progressed, the information morphed from at least 40 babies were killed to some were beheaded. On the day, the Israeli army could not confirm beheadings. The very next day, in London, commuters were subjected to this horrifying and unverified headline. On October 11th, many Western media outlets jumped on that claim, quoting the spokesman of Israel's prime minister.
The Israeli prime minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated in Kfar Aza.
But many of those same media outlets were forced to walk back their reporting, issuing updates like this one. Israel cannot confirm the specific claim that babies were beheaded in Hamas attack. Later that day, during a press conference, American President Joe Biden claimed he had seen photographs of beheaded babies, saying,
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
The White House later retracted the statement and published this correction. U.S. official and the president have not seen pictures nor confirmed such reports independently, but the damage had been done. Biden's initial claims were already featured on the front pages of many news outlets and continued to be cited in some quarters as justification for revenge attacks and the collective punishment of civilians in Gaza. Once these claims went viral, other journalists who were on the same visit to Kfar Aza on the 10th of October say, no one spoke to me about beheadings, let alone beheadings of children, let alone beheadings of 40 children. Another Israeli journalist said, during the tour, we didn't see any evidence of this, and the army spokesperson or commanders also didn't mention any such incidents. Sky News correspondent on the ground also confirms not being able to confirm these claims.
We have not seen the evidence of that. We have asked the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, 3 times to confirm those numbers. They have not yet.
Later, the same journalist that broadcasted the claims of the spokesman of Israel's prime minister posted an apology, saying, the Israeli government now says today it cannot confirm babies were beheaded. I needed to be more careful with my words, and I am sorry. Hamas has denied claims that its fighters beheaded children, calling them lies. As details continue to emerge from the aftermath of the Kfar Aza attack, the line between facts and misinformation has blurred. Lies and half-truths have been disseminated by officials and mainstream media in what is becoming a propaganda war.
So Al Jazeera English, because I know they have several foreign language outlets. The reporter that you heard was from Al Jazeera. What I took the most, I don't know if it was really the most, but from what the reporter was stating here, and again, I looked at the New York Post, I looked at CNN, I looked at Haaretz, and some of the other reporters, Israeli, whatnot, to verify what the woman from Al Jazeera was saying, and things map out. Let me rephrase that. Things seem to piece together. Now, I've heard people say that they've seen some of the beheadings. I don't know. But President Biden, think whatever you want about Joe Biden. President Biden actually came out and said he saw and confirmed. You heard it in the report. And then afterwards, the White House walked it back. Now, I got to ask you, and I'm all serious about this. How does the President of the United States stand there or sit there in front of a microphone and cameras and say that he saw and confirms the beheadings, and then have his staff turn around and say, we can't confirm that. He didn't see it. I'm asking a question. We also have reports about the mass rapes. I don't know that we're going to get into that one today, but you've heard the beheadings and maybe you've thought about them. You heard that report. I'm going to take a call. We'll go into a break, and then I'll take more of your calls on the other side. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hey, good afternoon, Brian.
Winging and wanging.
Hey, let's start off with this. I mean, if you asked Joe Biden, he was a founding member of the NWA too, right? Didn't he say he was actually Rudy from Notre Dame? Isn't that when, you ask him a question, he's going to give you whatever answer it is. I mean, you see it. Basically, he's done everything. He's part of every community. He does it all. That's why
I would tend to agree for his age. He has done it all.
But, it's funny that you played that clip because it goes to why I actually called. And, you brought up that little kid, right, that ran into the street, so on and so forth, and how the mom pulled him back and was yelling at him and that kid didn't understand. You mentioned that, and what immediately came to my mind, it was a perfect picture of the previous two callers, that guy Paul, who's, more on the conservative end, and then the other caller who's more on the liberal end, right? That's basically what's going on. It's they're kind of focusing on getting us to argue. We're arguing with each other instead of really focusing on the real issue at hand, and that's that we're getting milked by our own government. We're being fed propaganda. We're being fed a story that they want to give us to get us to fight with each other and not focus at what's really going on, the bigger picture. You see that across the board. And it goes on with, again, what you were just saying with Biden. That's why, he's, goes to every, he's a Puerto Rican, and that's why he goes to the Puerto Rican Day parade every year and all of that. No matter what story you put in front of him, he's been a part of it. It's kind of nonsense, and the fact that people don't actually see that is even a bigger problem. ABC News just said when we went to the break that the population for the first time is down. Yet you watch the news and they say our population and that it's increasing and that it's an issue and a detriment down into the future. But yet we just heard that it's down. The numbers are down since since the worst since 1979. So it's so which way is it?
So in other words, we have a lot of people leaving the country or dead, as opposed to a lot of people coming into the country and living wherever.
Yeah, well, what they said is that I believe that, people having babies.
The local report.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That just played on the news during the break. They said that the population, for the first time, people having babies is down. Something about population being down. But every time, you watch the news or Bill Gates and this and that, it's all about how population and the numbers increasing at an astronomical rate and that it's becoming an issue. So
I don't know, but I know that Ariel did that story. So when I get a chance, I'll try to find the story, and because that might just be something dealing with us here in the Commonwealth. I don't know. I'm going to let you go, though. I do appreciate the call. 508-996-0500. That's how you get onto the program today. Brian in for back. I did talk to Ariel over at the WBSM newsroom on the other side of Studio 6 and 7/8. She's going to get that story for us, and we'll try to find out. I only know bits and pieces that she was working on it beforehand. Let's get back to your calls. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hello there, Brian.
Hello.
So the birth rate in the U.S. has been dropping since 1830. That was our peak. We peaked out at 54% birth rate, which was we were putting 4.8% of the population back into circulation during that decade, during that decade. But every decade since 1830, except for the 50s and the 60s, and a little bit of the 70s, it's been dropping, and we're at a birth rate of 12%.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't we have a baby boom?
Yeah, it's basically the 40s started, the 50s, 60s, and a little bit into the 70s, but it dropped off after that, and it's been a slight decline. But since 1970, our birth rate is somewhere between 12 and 15%. So we're not putting the total population. It's a way smaller percentage we're replacing. But anyway, whatever. It's not earth-shattering. It's definitely been decreasing, and anyway.
Is that bad?
I don't know. I mean, you know, most civilizations that failed. Part of the major reason they failed is because their population decreased. China is actually facing that right now in a horrendous way. That's why they reversed their one-child policy. And they used to have a one-child policy for a long time. Well, now their birth rate dropped, and they don't have enough people working. And it seems like, from what I read, that the sub-25-year-olds don't want to work at all. So they have
the sub-25-year-olds don't want to work in China?
What's that?
The sub-25-year-olds don't want to work in China?
No, they're playing video games and all the other stuff, similar stuff to our kids.
That our kids are doing, yeah.
Yeah, they can't get them back to work. So they have an aging population that's going to age out, and when that happens, you know, it's going to be difficult for them. But anyway, we're okay with that because we're importing illegal aliens by the plane load, so we'll have plenty of people.
So we're balancing it out.
Yeah, we're going to balance it out. We're just going to bring them all in. Anyway, and after they vote, they can go work. Anyway, the reason why I was calling was, you know, the funny thing about fact checkers, you kind of did that whole fact checking Al Jazeera. You know, fact checkers didn't really exist prior to like 5 years ago, but they started. There's a million fact checkers now because people were trying to verify stories on social media, and then the mainstream media was doing stories, and people were telling them they didn't believe them, so they would have fact checkers fact check the stories from mainstream media. But what you find out is that the fact checkers generally are they're not trustworthy either. So because who's checking the fact checkers? Who are they? So in any case, you picked a topic that was beheading of Israeli babies. I guess the thing I would ask is, like, is the beheading of the babies, or the microwaving of the babies, or the killing of the babies, or the raping of the women, or the hostages taken? Like, you can parse the different subjects down, and I guess someone can report something inaccurately, but the fact is that October 7th did happen, and a certain amount of people were dead, a certain amount of people were taken hostage, a certain amount of people were raped, and all the other horrific stories in between. So parsing off one part of it doesn't really solve anything to me. Interesting
that you would put it that way, and I do have a couple of other cuts that I can get into today because, you know, here's what happens. Just going to take the beheading since that's what we just heard. People are going to believe, yep. People are not going to believe. I'm in the category that says New York Post, CNN, Al Jazeera, Haaretz, other independent observers are now saying, and even the Israeli military is saying, that didn't happen. So I'm just going to go on that. But if we have our own president coming out and saying that he saw and confirms, and then the White House has to backtrack on that, we got some serious problems. All right, so that's that one issue. But there's more to it, though, because when you hear something like that, it dehumanizes not only the people that could have been beheaded, but those that are stated to have done the beheading. And so when folks go to slaughter them, they say, oh, well, they need to be slaughtered anyway because they were out beheading others, when in fact they weren't. No, I hear you, Brian. I'm not refuting that. I think the thing is that of the greater issue was, were there people killed? Were there people taken away in hostages? And, you know, it reminds me of Ilhan Omar because she was confronted with a question about 9/11, and what was her response? Her response was, somebody did something. That's such BS that I'd love to say the proper word in her face and say, you know what? We saw those buildings come down and the people die and all the other stuff. Somebody did something. You know, that's a scumbag response to a tragedy. And I'm not blaming, you know, the Israelis or the Palestinians or Hamas. It's pretty easy to figure out what happened. And I think people want to backtrack and say, but Hamas did what they did because of all these other things and because Israel was put there in the 40s and they shouldn't have been put. I don't care.
At the end of the day, all of these protests and stuff aren't going to matter. What's going to matter is, does Israel sit down with the Palestinians and solve their issues, or is this just going to be a bloodbath for the next?
Well,
I don't know.
And it might be. I think back to when I was a kid, and we saw what was going on between the Protestants and the Catholics over in Ireland, Northern Ireland. And I never thought that was going to end, but eventually it did, and everybody seems to be getting along. I don't know, I'm not there, but I haven't heard of complaints. Maybe that's because either they're keeping it under zipped lips or nothing is happening. I don't know.
Well, let me leave you with this, though. I respect what you're saying, and you're trying to bring up the facts and trying to, I think you deal with facts, realistically. I don't think you're fake anything or whatever. But, people are beating up on the United States all the time. And I got to tell you, after World War II, the entire world was on its heels, or if not on its backside. And if the United States was an evil country, if it was a Russia or if it was a China, we could have taken over the entire world or any country we wanted to take over. But you know what we did? We did just the opposite. We rebuilt the countries that were damaged to the ground. The Marshall Plan was about saving people. We did things like the Berlin Airlift. We have a good country with good people in general, and yet you have these different people that try to throw the U.S. under the bus for different reasons. But morally, we generally take the right path.
I hear you. I think part of the problem is the bad always gets magnified more than the good, and there's a lot of bad going on that the United States seems to be behind. So for all the good that we did in the 40s and 50s, and I can even take it back to World War I, it's diminished by the fact that you've got people alive today that don't know about that stuff, or not too many. Not too many. All right, man. Hey, thanks for the call as always. I appreciate it. 508-996-0500 to get onto the program today. I listened to that cut, and I played it for a woman friend. If you don't, you've heard me speak about woman friend before. She is a Jewish American, very proud of her heritage. I am agnostic. We get along well. But when subjects like this come up, I have to tread softly. I openly admit it. She might be listening right now, and she knows it. I have to tread softly because if I come out and say, well, look what they're doing, her response is going to be because the other folks are doing this. And so Saturday, we sat down, believe it or not, during dinner, and I played the cut that you heard just a little while ago. And she was astonished. There's another one that I'm going to play that sealed the astonished deal. And I hear not only from her, but many other Jewish Americans. They have been brought up to believe certain things about Israel. And many of those things that they have been taught to believe are absolutely true, 1,000%. But some of it seems to be, going to be cautious with my words here, seems to be at the expense of other folk. So I'll let you try to make your decision on this. Here is another cut, a little bit longer than the first one. I want you, if you will, again, indulge me, to listen to this. I don't know exactly what Zaka is, but I believe they're part of like a rescue or a paramedics type group. And this is one of the spokesmen that you will hear from their group. The following is an excerpt from the documentary October 7, by the Al Jazeera Investigative Unit. You might have all kinds of thoughts. Al Jazeera, why are you even paying attention to them? I pay attention to so many different news organizations, it would make your head spin. But in saying that, if you listen to the story, you will hear other sources quoted. You won't be able to see the stories highlighted like I can see and read and have read that backs up what you are going to hear. This, again, October 7th, and the actual title, if you go to look at it on YouTube, would be My Executed Israeli Children Story Was Untrue, admits Zaka's Yossi Landau.
Two days later, the regional head of Zaka, a voluntary organization charged with collecting bodies, gives a different account to Sky News of what happened at the same house.
And you're talking children, 2 piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death. This is something behind, this is next level. And
I mean, it's actually indescribable, really. It's indescribable, really.
It's indescribable, and I won't describe everything that I saw.
This account is repeated by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a conversation with President Biden.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
The list of the dead shows 2 12-year-old twins are killed when police and army stormed the house in Be'eri. But there are no other children.
There was an interview you did with Sky Television from Britain. 2 piles, we found them in Be'eri. 2 piles of 10 children each were tied back to back and burned to death. Now again, I mean, if we look at the death figures at Be'eri, there are only 10 children that died at Be'eri.
Not children, it's 18-year-old. So we all together, when you look at them and they're burned, you don't know exactly the ages. So you're talking about 18-year-old, 20 years old, and you just don't look on the spot identification to see the ages or something like that.
It is not the only questionable story that Yossi Landau tells about Kibbutz Be'eri.
We go further. Then we see a woman. She was lying on the floor, a puddle of blood, big puddle of blood. She was a pregnant woman. Her stomach was butchered open. The baby that was connected to the cord was stabbed, and she was shot in the back.
Kibbutz Be'eri has denied this account.
The story of the pregnant woman reported by Zaka is not relevant to Be'eri.
Yossi Landau insists he witnessed this scene at Be'eri.
If you want to see the picture, I have the picture of it.
Are you able to share the photographic evidence with us?
To show you. Yes. Where's my phone? Oh, I'm sorry. I will not put it in front of the camera.
No, that's fine. I'll come and look.
This is the knife they used.
Shot and killed, but
Over here was the woman.
But that's the imagery after the bodies had been cleared away. Oh.
Yes. This is the baby. This is it.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother.
Okay.
For sure, you know, we didn't think when we were over there, we didn't think to camera everything. We didn't have that. This wasn't in our
Okay. The photo shows an unidentifiable piece of charred flesh. The list of the dead contains no victim that fits Yossi Landau's description. On October 7th, 2 babies die. One is killed when a bullet is fired through a door. The other dies following an emergency cesarean after the mother is shot. Neither is burned or beheaded.
You being someone who, with your own hands, with your own eyes, with your nose, you smelled this, what would you say to that person who is downplaying what took place here?
I wouldn't say anything. I would ask, please give me, he should be together with the Hamas terrorist and he should be killed because he's a part of it.
Visiting celebrities continue to be shown babies' cribs, and the world continues to be told stories about murdered babies.
When you're taking babies, cutting them and tying them together and burning them to death, you're treating them less than an animal.
1,300 people dead, murdered, babies.
These bastards put these babies in an oven and put on their oven. We found the kid a few hours later.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken describes the fate of 2 small children.
Family of 4, a young boy and girl, 6 and 8 years old, and their parents around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out in front of his kids. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off before they were executed. And then their executioners sat down and had a meal. That's what this society is dealing with.
This story also comes from Yossi Landau and Zaka. An analysis of the evidence suggests that it is also untrue. Of the 782 unarmed victims of October 7, 36 are children, 13 under the age of 12. None died in the circumstances described by Antony Blinken.
Free. Back to Barry Richard on WBSM. Call 508-996-0500.
Oh, a microphony. And a phony at the mic.
Yep, that's me. 508-996-0500. You've had a chance to hear a couple of clips that you may have heard before. You may have been following up. You may have done your own homework, your own research. Maybe you have not. Antony Blinken giving his account. Again, if indeed this has happened, beheadings, cooking kids in ovens and stuff like that, it is beyond the pale. It's a terrible atrocity, and I don't mean to make light even calling it a terrible atrocity. But considering the amount of evidence, again, it's not just one source, it's several sources, Israeli sources, refuting information that they somehow originally had let out. What is that telling you? To me, it's telling me that the United States, our government, in particular our government, is green-lighting what is going on in Gaza. You can guess as much as you want the reasons why it's happening, but that seems to be what's going on. And then you have folks that are out there protesting, and they're called pro-Palestinian protest. And we can mince words here. But the fact of the matter is, if you talk to some of these protesters, they will tell you they're out there protesting for a couple of reasons. One, they want their university or college to divest in companies that are doing business with Israel. All right, that's not talking pro-Palestinian. And under the circumstance, that could be seen as reasonable. Reasonable. The other reason why they're protesting is it's titled a genocide. Not by me, but by the world. To me, it's more of an ethnic cleansing, but that's Brian's way of looking at it. But the fact of the matter, that's the other reason why these folks are out there. They're out there protesting. And somehow, some way, the term anti-Semitic is getting used, getting thrown in there. When in fact, many Jewish folks are organizing these protests. They're having Seders, Passover Seder. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think I've been to one in my life. But again, according to a Jewish student, it's, we're supposed to invite people to come together. And that's why they have Muslim and Palestinians. I didn't know that you could really tell one from the other. Goes to show the ignorance that many of us, including yours truly, has about many different people. If you were to ask me, getting a little off the track here, but if you were to ask me about the Iranians, I would have said, well, they're Muslim. Come to find out, they're really not. So here we have this huge conflict that's going on, and a lot of it, in my opinion, is because of the rhetoric that is allowed to pop around. In many circles, if we were talking about Hitler's Nazi Germany, it would be deemed propaganda. Hour 3 of the Barry Richards Show coming up after ABC and Ariel's report, and we will also